how the business has to change. So one of the ways we think about it is we have sort of an idea of the 3 Ps. That we always have single letters which you have multiple meanings for. Always works. So they tell me. So for many businesses when they start, it's very much about the practical elements of can I earn enough from my business in order to make my life sustainable? Can I pay my mortgage? Can I pay my rent? Can we feed the children, put clothes on their backs, that type of thing. So it's all about the practical aspects of how is a business big enough to be able to be financially sustainable. And then the next stage of that can be the sort of looking at the sort of possible growth that they may have from that side. So there they may be working as a consultant or working, selling a product, and they say, actually, if only I had one more person, I could expand the business, I could increase the revenue. If only I had another sales guy, if only I had somebody else to do the delivery, then I could grow a little bit bigger. And it's that sort of organic growth. What we're talking about is how do you step outside that and then look at the potential market that you might be aiming at and to say, whatever that market might be geographically, whether it's sort of locality, whether it's in Croydon, whether it's in South London, whether it's the UK, is saying, if I want to address that market, how big does the company have to be? And how does the company going to work in order to meet that market? What does it need to look like? So it's not thinking about what's my next hire, it's saying, if I want to do several million turnover, what does the company have to look like to be able to achieve that and to deliver that product? And then to work back from that as to what the steps, what the stages might be to go through in order to get the company to that scale. And the reason why that's a very useful process to go through is because you look at the more fundamental ideas within the business and look at the roles within it, look at the structure, look at the business model, and then work through that as to how you actually design and build a business to deliver that side. And then what hires would you need to make at what time, what investment you might need, what sort of retained profits you might need to make that a possibility. So there's different aspects that come into that in terms of creating a business model that works at that side. And it's often strange that you often talk to people and say, oh yes, because on our website we often say criteria for companies joining the Innovation Centre is you must have a new idea, you must have a reasonable market to go for, and you must have the sort of potential to grow to £1 million business. So strangely, I don't know why it is, but strangely when people apply, they say, how big do you want to be? Oh, about £1 million business. Funny that. But actually very few people actually think about what that means. If you're running a business doing a couple of £100,000 a year, which somebody might operate as being sort of 1 or 2 consultants, a couple of people helping them, that type of thing, and they're doing enough to sort of keep them, as I say, keep the mortgage, keep the rent paid, that type of thing. And you say, okay, so you're doing a couple of £100,000 a year. If I ask you to do that a couple of £100,000 a month, how does that change the business? And people have sort of quite a double take on that side. Say, well, yeah, I can't do that myself. It's not just me having another one of me to do that. It's actually trying to find, well, if I was to do a couple of £100,000 a month, what's the sales pipeline look like? How do I actually get that many inquiries through? How do I handle that? What is the process by which that goes through? If it's a seasonal business or something which has its sort of revenue ups and downs, how do I manage that? Where I'd say, I can get, all my revenue comes in the last 3 months of the year. So how do I actually fund all that stock? How do I fund the staff through those sites? So it requires people to think differently about the setup of the business. So the way we often try to help people do that, and sort of fundamentally how people re-look at their business, is to say it's absolutely critical in doing that you move from having a sort of cash flow type accounts or finance model, move from a sort of situation where you're just sort of making sure that you just have the cash flow in and make sure you have profits moving through, to something where you actually use the financial information to drive your understanding of the business. You need to build the sort of metrics in the business, the sort of KPIs if you like, to understand how can I manage different aspects of the business if I'm not doing everything. Because that's one of the key aspects of scaling the business, is creating a structure where you can effectively delegate and effectively gather information and manage the business based on the financial information and other information coming through, which allows you to see what's going on, what's happening, and to take corrective actions when you need to. So actually not doing it on an Excel spreadsheet on your own, but actually moving to an accounts system, just so you then have the information to create a financial management information system which delivers you with information and allows you to understand how the business is going, is an important part of it. Secondly, and it's one of the most difficult things I find for companies to achieve when they're scaling, is that so many businesses, when they're starting off, are very much character-based. So it's the individual entrepreneur that has that ability to sell their product, because essentially they're selling themselves. And so they can build up a certain level of business by doing that. As soon as you say, who else can sell your business, how can you employ a salesperson to do that? Often a lot of companies get unstuck because they can't actually sell it in the same way. And sometimes the entrepreneur can't actually define their product or define what their service is in such a way as somebody else can sell it for them. So it's almost moving away from having a personality-driven brand to having a product-driven brand or company-driven brand. And that's actually surprisingly difficult to do, because, as I say, you're having to move it away from something where someone is saying, the company represents me, I represent the company, and I can present that to people. But the entrepreneur themselves can't be at every sales meeting, can't be at every sort of pitch. And certainly if you're moving from a consultative sale to a product sale, they absolutely can't do it all, because then they'd never make a profit, because they'd be spending too much time doing it. So actually moving that sort of understanding a company brand and understanding how to represent the business, how to actually present that in a almost like a script, if you like, or a way of describing the product that someone else can do, is key to that scalability, because somebody else is going to have to sell your product for you. In the same ways, we often have sort of things that people come in and very proudly they say, well, I've been running this business for a little while and I've never had to market myself, because people just come to me, and everybody that wants to work with us, they just want to work directly with me. That's how good I am, that's how good my business is. And you say, well, that's a disaster, because you can't grow. You're so pivotal to it that nobody else will work with any other part of your business apart from you. You are the constraining factor. So you have to be in a position where you say your business can operate if you're not there for a few months. And it can actually often operate better when you're not there for a few months. That's often the key issue in these things. So it's about gaining the financial information to understand the business. It's about representing the business not as a personal brand, but as actually building the branding and building the understanding, the ethos of the company, which can still represent the person, the entrepreneur that sets it up, but can be projected and sold by somebody else. And then in terms of delivery, it may be about actually how do you manage and maintain the quality? How do you actually build teams that deliver that product on your behalf? And all those assets come into it. So one of the other key areas that we find in how companies grow their business is that they have to move from a single point entrepreneur, founder leading the business, to having a management team. And that is really hard, because often the funds aren't there, the money's not there in order to actually employ those people. And so you end up having the sort of the entrepreneur running around trying to be all those different positions. And looking at how the marketing versus the sales versus the operations, product development, all those different aspects, how they work and how they're represented within the business. One of the ways we found that works well with companies in doing that is that we can use members of our own team to say, we'll represent marketing or finance or sales in the business. We won't be doing it all, but it's just having someone that will actually talk up from that side, and so we'll give you that more holistic view of the business and understand how making a decision on one part of the business, that actually having a drive on sales, and we'll put all our focus on sales. If you don't actually sort out how you're going to deliver against it, it's a complete waste of time. So create that balance and creating that element of the business that actually works and works together as it grows. Also, it can be a question as to what does a bigger business look like? So that sometimes it can be pod type growth, where you say, well, our business works best when there's a team of 5 of us, and what we do is we deliver a product on that basis. You say, well, having a team of 10, does that work? Or do you need 2 teams of 5? And how do you manage that? How do you move to a position where it's not just having all senior consultants delivering something, but actually how do you employ more junior people to deliver in part of it? How do you create a business that, rather than doing everything bespoke for a client, but you are building up aspects of your business which can be repeated, and that you're then producing more of a product which can be applied to different customers? So it's those whole business models that sit within it. And a key thing might be, well, how do I get other people to sell for me so I can focus on actually what I do best? Because if you've got a product which you can say, actually that could be sold as part of somebody else's offering, but my key thing is in how I deliver it and how I deliver a greater margin from it, then that could be the focus of the business. So it's looking to understand what's good and what works really well within the business and say, that's the bit that you're trying to grow, that's the bit you're trying to expand from that side. Some people look at acquisitions, some people look at franchises, some people look at all sorts of different models of growing. And especially for small companies when they start, you have to appreciate that the model might be right to grow that way, but if your management team or if your own skills don't fit that, then that's going to be difficult to apply. So sometimes people think that, for example, franchising is the easiest way of doing it because I just had this idea, I let somebody else use it, they pay me money. Well, it doesn't work that way. If you want to buy a franchise, you want to know every single bit of financial and operational information about that franchise before you take it on. Because what is your investment work? How is someone going to market that product across the whole industry and allow you to operate a business? And what profit do you expect to make from that business? You can only get that from the experience that the franchisor actually has and how they've operated the business themselves. So actually building the financial information and the business model around that is actually key to be able to sell it to other franchisees and get them on board to do it. So I think the whole thing about sort of the whole growth aspects of it, when it's not just taking a sort of incremental organic step, we're saying, how do I employ the next salesperson? How do I move into the next street or the next town or one more customer? Is actually having that ability to step back from the company and sort of look at, okay, what size does this company need to be? What market can it address? If it's addressing that market, what does it need to look like? And how do I actually design that to make it work? Rather than saying, I need 6 new sales guys, it may mean that I need a new sales manager and 3 sales guys. How do I make that decision? How do I draw that out and design it? And that's often where people need some help, need some important things in terms of actually how to do modelling, how to forecast and do proper sort of financial forecast going forward as to how does this work? What do I need at any one particular time? What's my financial exposure? What's my credit limits that I need to do that? How can I persuade that or present that to the bank so they can understand what I'm trying to do and what the benefits will be at the end of it and how they can support me in doing it? And so all those elements come into it as to actually how you plan for growth. And so often we see that people, when they're not planning for growth and they just do it on an incremental basis, they just say, well, we're all really busy, but we haven't done any sales for the last 6 months, so I'm about to go bust. It's actually just going back and thinking, what makes sense? How do you get a proper all-round view of the business to make sure that you understand how this will work at the next stage? And part of the reasons why we focus on that couple of 100,000 to a couple of million is that the management team that you need and the financial processes that you need and the structure that you need to run a couple of £1 million business is usually the same as you need for a £10 million business. So it's much easier to scale from that point because it then is just how do you realise the potential of that increased scale of business. And so it's an important jump. It's a difficult jump. I think people often underestimate it. But once you've achieved that, then you can have the real sort of staging post to actually really grow the business out from there. I was going to let you ask some questions.
That's great. Are there any questions at all?
I knew I had to finish before you.
Just as a show of hands, who here has their own business? And who here is employed? Lots of entrepreneurs in the room, and many people have scaled already. Have you got any experiences you'd like to share about scaling?
What's your opinion on 5-year financial forecasts?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a bit like people that want to see your projected balance sheet at year 5, that type of thing. That it's, if they believe it, they're mad in that sense. I think what people need to see, or what they want to see from that, is that you do actually understand what's involved in scaling the business. So that what you often see when people present a 5-year forecast is where you seem to have said that your profit margin is going from 10% to 50% because you've increased the sales, but you haven't increased the size of the sort of the overhead or the staff you need to do it. So it's people understanding that you do actually recognise the need to actually scale all parts of the business, not just revenue. So I think it can show an understanding of whether the business is being managed properly.
One question from that. When do you think financial forecasts are accurate? When you say 6 months, you should know, a year, you should know, 2 years, you should know?
It so depends on the business that if, for example, you're building recurring revenue streams, then that's much easier to start moving into a situation where you can predict your revenue quite clearly. The important thing is actually having the elements of the what ifs. If that revenue is 10% less or 10% more, then how is the business going to react to it, and how is it going to change to be able to cope with providing a degree of sort of rugosity in the business, so it can deal with different changes. So if companies are focused on very high value sales which are very intermittent, it's very difficult to have the financial forecast. But are you building a business that has a scalable cost structure to enable you to react to different financial climates? So there's no right answer in terms of when you get in the position to be able to do that.
Can you share a real story where somebody who was, one-man band, did everything,
Okay.
and has now maybe employs 10 people, so he's 10 times the size now?
Oh, I have to pick one of the small ones. Okay, I'll pick one that that we had quite a lot of involvement with, so that's what helps on that side. So it's a company called Oban Multilingual down in Brighton. He was an academic at the University of Brighton, and he developed a way of looking at digital marketing which was focused on how to optimize digital marketing for different demographics rather than translating websites for different markets. So what he was looking at doing was saying, rather than saying I will translate from English to Portuguese, would say actually I'm trying to sell this product over here for 16-year-old Portuguese speaking girls in Brazil, and over here to 50-year-old German-speaking men in Dusseldorf. And how is that process different? What he saw, and he'd done a lot of work with UKTI, was just how badly people actually exported and how badly they actually presented if they had any, translated text at all, or really how they did it. And so he joined us, and I think he had 2 members of staff. He was doing, let's say, about 150, 200,000 pounds a year, and he had no end of clients. UKTI were driving clients to him, but he was jumping all over the country, meeting clients and taking those projects forward, but he was responsible for delivery as well. And we thought this would go really well. It had that sort of stage where you have a product where effectively we can't see any limit to the demand on that side. And so he came in and he said, I'm quitting, I'm giving up. And you go, great, we just put you out as one of our case studies of a successful business and you're about to quit. And you go, well, why? He said, well, I haven't seen my wife, hardly seen my kids. I've gone from having an academic sort of lifestyle to being here all the time and travelling all the time. I haven't had a holiday in a year and a half. I'd love to bring my brother in to work with me, but I could never see me getting to the point where I could have sufficient revenue to be able to bring him in. He was a finance guy. And it's just not working. I'm lonely, I'm fed up, and I'm just frustrated with what I'm doing. And I'd say I might as well quit. You go, well, there must be a way around this. And so what I said at the time, is when we started doing all this stuff, is say, well, what if you had my team? What if I gave you a management team to try and get you through that sort of stepping stone? We can't give you any money, we haven't got the money to invest in you, that type of thing. But is it about that? Or is it about how to actually understand the growth of the business? And so what we did was we set up a deal whereby we said he could go from, I think, £200,000 a year turnover to, I think it was 1.6 million was what we chose. And we said, if we get you to 1.6 million in a year, you give us a success fee. And you pay minimum sort of rates on doing like that. So we set up a finance director, or quasi-director, finance director, marketing director, sales director, ops director. I think I was acting as the chairman, that type of thing. And so what they did was, we weren't making any of the decisions for the company, but we delivered the information for him to make decisions on. So we were very much about driving market research, where was the clients who were coming from, and then how did you structure that into a proper sales pipeline to be able to manage it and take it from that side so that other people could sell it, and how do you create the operational workforce who could deliver the products on that side, how did you structure the software development so it was increasingly creating reusable products on that side. And I think it was about 9 months into that, that the other thing we did was that we would actually help him recruit management to replace our own staff. So that was also part of the deal within it. So 9 months in, he was doing 1.8 million. He had a team of about sort of 20 by that stage. And it was just sort of flowing. He'd had a holiday. He'd recruited his brother, who was now the finance director, and they were just sort of looking then at sort of whether they'd bring in investment, whether they'd bring a US office. They've now got 3 offices around the world, and they're doing about 15 million. But as I say, it was all about actually saying, how can I have a team that allows me to focus on what the business needs to look like? And there's lots of examples from that side where it is what a lot of investors would say, and if you look at accelerators, that type of thing, they will very rarely invest in an individual, that they will invest in teams. And that's part of the reason that often it's much easier for a team to grow from that side. But that's not the way life works. And what we see is a lot of people where it may be 2 people, maybe 1 people, but very rarely a balanced management team. I remember there being an incubator over in Wales, one of their techniums, and their criteria for taking companies into their facility was that they must have a world-class product with worldwide patents, with a fantastic management team, with multi-million-pound sales, and a $1 billion market to aim at, and that. You go, well, what is it you're going to provide? They've already got everything. What we often deal with is people with huge amounts of potential, but people that have gaps in their knowledge, in their experience, in their management team, in their resources, whatever. But what you have to do is say the idea is good enough to help someone move that project forward, and to help fill the gaps, and help to build the experience, help to build the management team, and the other aspects around it. So I think it's actually recognising that that's where an awful lot of people are, and then how to actually take the companies on from that point.
So that sort of step between going from a company that's basically dominated by one person and a couple of people who work for them to something that can actually scale up and can either be commoditized or just start going from a few hundred thousand a year to a million a year. There seems to be at that point a need for a real jump, and I guess what I'm wondering is how much of that is need for funds, or things that would require funds that can be got other ways, like you mentioned, getting hold of a team who will work with you for successful, just, how do you get that? Because that seems like quite a big, I mean, you know you need to do it, but how do you do it?
Well, I think that, first of all, is actually having a realisation that you need to do it is quite an important thing within it. And then is actually structuring within that. So I'm not going to say it's going to be any easier, realising it's still going to be hard to actually do it. But you start looking at the business in a different way, and you start saying, what's the first element of that I can get into place, which allows me to maybe make more profit so I can invest a bit more. And how do I actually start putting the components in place? What might be my short-term strategies that say, actually, can I partner with someone that will do the sales for me while I build the operations team, or vice versa? Sometimes it can be, okay, I'll use somebody else's software to deliver part of this whilst I build the development team. So it's looking at what those component parts are, but also that becomes a far more investable proposition. So what we see, and what we definitely found with a lot of the companies that we were working for a few years ago when I sort of first started doing all this, was that virtually all the companies we worked with weren't investable because they were one or two people with an idea and didn't have much management experience, so they wouldn't actually get investment. But as you start building up the credibility and the strategy within the business, then it becomes more credible to the investors. So one of the things we did a lot of from that side was say, okay, if we can't bring a first investor into the business, what's the next best alternative, even better alternative? And our view was, how about the first customer? How can we get the first customer into a business? Because actually, if you have a customer on board, that is one of the biggest things to enable a company to scale, because you've got a reason to be doing it. And also you have a sort of customer that is giving you far greater insight as to what the product needs to do, but also what the business model needs to be for them to buy things. So it can be about building on that side. So if you can start saying, this is my plan of how I'm going to build something, because it becomes a proper plan. This is the customer, this is who I'm going to sell to, or I am selling to now. Then it starts becoming more of a credible proposition, and allows people to invest more themselves in doing things, because that's often a big issue. Or it can be bringing in external investment, or other ways of getting your customers to invest. There's all sorts of different people that can invest in business. It's not just about equity investors. Any other questions?
How important do you think repeatability is about the scaling of businesses? In my experience, I've done a lot of consultancy, done a lot of things, but I think, especially even if consulting comes down, making sure you have a process for heating something. In your experience, maybe seen people, when they get that right, does that create a quick scaling?
Yeah, it's an important thing in terms of, obviously depending on what the product is, that type of thing, is the more repeatable the service, the more productizable it becomes as well. So it becomes something that you can say, again, it doesn't necessarily need the detailed involvement of the founder all the time, because you create a process which can repeat and can deliver that product to a range of different people. And one of the key things that's it's probably a silly story, but I remember dealing with a company which is based around two artists in again down in Brighton, and they had developed a lot of PR and a lot of good press about their wonderfully designed toilet seats. And so what they were doing was creating these new artworks which were around different styles of toilet seat, and they were being used in celebrities' homes and various sort of interior design magazines. And it might be that they'd be a sort of a clear toilet seat, but you'd have fishes in it. That type, not being fish, but the sort of that type of, and they got an awful lot of press, and they sort of got a nice grant to develop it forward as an artist, and they were doing that. And they got to the point saying, actually, we're going to stop this now. We're going to close this down because too many people want it. You've got loads of people trying to do it, and it's that whole thing of saying what they were producing in their mind was works of art, and that was of interest to them. It fired them up. It gave them the enthusiasm, that type of thing. As soon as it started becoming a product where they could employ a manufacturer and they would churn out, tens of thousands of toilet seats with goldfish in it, that type of thing, they'd lost interest. But that actually became a sustainable, profitable business on that side. And that's what you can often find with sort of consultancy businesses, is that they're actually, a lot of the reason why people become consultants is because they don't want to repeat and repeat and repeat. They want the excitement of always having a new project to work on and that type of thing. But often there's that change in mindset where you say, well, actually, you can invest more in terms of how you do things for yourself in terms of the special projects by creating infrastructure which can deliver good, solid, repeatable outputs for people that want your services. And the fact that they're not exciting to you anymore is irrelevant. What's exciting is growing the business to deliver it and to make sure that you're increasing your output and your impact on the sort of the market around you. So it works in different ways for different companies, but the more that it's sometimes part of the technical compromise you might make is the fact that if you have one, you know, say for example developing web apps or that type of thing where you can develop each one from scratch, or you can develop a sort of base product which you can then white label and change and produce multiple times. One might be less interesting to you as a sort of user interface designer, but the second is a way of actually delivering the same product to 20 different people and actually creating something which is out in the market and is growing, is building on that side. So that can be, let's say, that productization of the service in a sense which can be very valuable in growing the business. Yeah.
Do you find any consultants who spend half of their time on consulting and making money this way and half of their time on producing a product and saying that is a scalable thing?
The honest answer is no. There are some, obviously. What tends to happen, and what we see a lot, is people say they're trying to productize their product, and what they actually do is use it as a way of selling their consultancy. So it becomes a door opener, and so as soon as you start talking about actually how do you have a separate strategy for that product itself, how do you say who should that product be sold to and marketed to and that type of thing, as opposed to who are your clients, then it becomes a different way in which the company has to think. So that, for example, it might make sense to sell your product to your competitors. And how does that work in the consultant side? But very, very often we see that good products get sort of bogged down in the sense that they become the thing that they give away in order to get the consultancy work. And the reason for that is because the consultancy work is what pays their bread and butter, and they haven't actually developed the sales and the product to the extent where that takes over that product. And it's a hard change, and it is almost completely rethinking your business if you move from doing consultative selling or agency selling to product selling.
Great, thank you. Mike's going to be here for a little bit longer. Thank you all for coming. If you'd like to grab a tea or coffee and hang around, or if you need to get back to work, then so be it. But yeah, thanks very much, Mike.
Good, thank you.
How are you?
They're doing very well.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Okay, shall we go?
Sure.
Like this slide? Thank you. We had very good evidence.
Absolutely, as later we were lucky enough to get such a whole plan now. 2017, and we followed that path along for 3 years. Maybe we set budgets and we talked about so still a very small scale. Come 2017.
Big Sussex Innovation Centre.
So a friend of the family, my best friend,
What you often need is someone to sit
the
down.
most wonderful story about a house in the great place in his wife like makeup, so he only had 5 bad experience. She's still now he's playing like in the end, plays out and comes up. He's still writing so every time she hears it, she knows she's late. So he started going like big, every time we get away,
Let's start.
I tried it.
How do you make that work?
Well, at what point do you
Oh yeah,
Did you mean right at the beginning? No.
Of course, I didn't read writing.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry. I thought you know when you were. Oh yeah, no. It was at the beginning, it's that VHS power.
And there's this now.